Chapter 17. My Well-Beloved's Leisure. The exchange of letters between Jim and me during the months I had been with the Colorados had not been frequent, but I detected a certain rise in temperature. Had Jim by now decided that marriage might facilitate rather than impede his missionary work? I could not help hoping, but I kept my letters as cool as I could. Doreen had also kept up her correspondence with the young Ecuadorian, and it looked as though an engagement was not far off. Dorothy was visited from time to time by the Ecuadorian, who was professing conversion and wanted her to marry him. Barbara was as detached as ever from all such extracurricular activities. On the night of January 29th, 1953, only 3 days after Macario's death, I was sitting as usual over my language notes when I heard the sound of horses' hoofs. I took the lantern outside and was greeted by a friend from Santo Domingo who handed me a telegram. Jim was waiting for me in Quito. The 10-hour climb up the western slope of the Andes by banana truck the next day had never seemed so interminable. Never were there so many passengers to wait for, never so many landslides to be cleared before we could proceed, never such a long delay at the chain. At last we came over the top at San Juan and descended into the beautiful valley where the city lay. There was a taxi ride from the truck stop to the home of friends where Jim was staying, a controlled greeting in the presence of others, dinner with the others, and at long last an evening alone, when he asked me to marry him. Before I gave him my answer, I thought of a lot of things he had said in the past about why he could not ask me to marry him. I thought of what he had written in my college yearbook, knowing that the affairs of this life, from which he intended to keep himself disentangled, included marriage. I remembered his desire to be like the Apostle Paul, free to give himself to the work of the gospel without the hindrances of wife and children, and I knew that his father had prayed for this kind of life for Jim. I thought of an older missionary's warning that the Quechua work could not be done as it ought to be done except by a single man. But I loved him. I had loved him for a long, long time, and I had tried to keep that love in a tight rein, praying often in Amy Carmichael's words, "And shall I pray thee change thy will, Father, until it be according unto mine? But no, Lord, no, that never shall be. Rather, I pray thee blend my human will with thine. I pray thee hush the hurrying, eager longing. I pray thee soothe the pangs of keen desire. See in my quiet places wishes thronging. Forbid them, Lord, purge, though it be with fire. And work in me to will and do thy pleasure. Let all within me peaceful, reconciled, tarry content, my well-beloved's leisure. At last, even as a weaned child." And so I asked Jim if he believed God had given his permission for us to marry. He did, and that was enough for me. But, he said, it might be 5 years or so before we could marry. Surely not, I thought, but I did not say it. Surely God would not ask us to wait another 5 years. We'd waited 5 already since our first recognition of love. Jim explained that he had made commitments to do a lot of building for other missionaries, and they came first. He wanted to do some itinerating throughout the Quechua territory before settling down. And there was one more thing. "You must learn Quechua," he said. "Before we get married?" "Before we get married. I've seen enough of missionary wives who come out all starry-eyed expecting to work alongside their husbands and then get bogged down taking care of a household and having babies so that they never get around to learning the language. That won't happen to you. You'll learn it first." I accepted the proposal and the conditions, willing to pay any price for this man, and that took care of the business for the evening. The rest of our time was spent in front of the fire trying to express what we had never before been free to express. I have told elsewhere how what appeared to be an active case of tuberculosis was discovered when I had a routine chest x-ray shortly after our engagement. Further tests showed it was a mistake, or as Jim suspected, perhaps God had healed me in the interim, in answer to prayer, but our confidence in God's leading was for several days sternly tried. It was a stern trial also to say goodbye and go our separate ways to the opposite sides of the Andes once more. I had a long row to hoe on the Colorado language before I could think about Quechua. And I went back to San Miguel more determined than ever to do the job, to coach Doreen and Barbara in the use of the materials I had collected so that they could carry on by themselves, and then to move out and go to the eastern jungle where I could start learning Quechua. I wrote Catherine von Schlegel's hymn in my diary. Be still, my soul, thy best, thy heavenly friend, through thorny ways leads to a joyful end. Be still, my soul, thy God doth undertake to guide thy future as he has the past. Thy hope, thy confidence, let nothing shake. All now mysterious shall be bright at last.